Hello everyone, welcome back. So this week's episode, well, it's not really going to be a house episode, it's going to be another tour video, as the title would say, or would lead you to believe. So let's get into those quick little tours, and I want to talk a bit more about both of the neighborhoods. So I'll see you guys then. So my neighborhood, which is St. Louis Place, really started developing in the 1870s, post-Civil War. It was mostly a German-Irish neighborhood. The architectural styles of the area are Romanesque, Richardsonian Romanesque, Second Empire, and Italianate, among others. It's a way less cohesive, let's say, than Lafayette Square. St. Louis Avenue, at one point, was known as Millionaire's Row because of all the grand homes along St. Louis Avenue. The southern part of the neighborhood was really more working class. There's also patches of it they would call like kind of Carry Patch area. And those were smaller kind of row houses or tenement houses kind of slammed together. Now the first thing you might have noticed, and I know I've got a lot of comments about it, is why are there so many missing buildings? Well, there's a huge number of factors in that. One of the major factors is a place called Pruitt-Igoe, which was a city planned and developed like mid-rise tower projects, essentially, that they built in the 60s to replace slums, as they like to call it. And essentially what they did is they built these things and then they never maintained them. There's huge documentaries about it. You can go watch it. It's currently a field. I think the buildings only lasted 15 years before they tore them all back down, or maybe 20 years. There's, of course, also redlining, racism, white flights. I mean, you can go through the huge amount of factors that happen to many of these cities. Also, loss of industry. Most American cities face similar problems. At least ones in the Midwest and the South, and even cities in the North like Buffalo follow same problem or similar problems.
If the city is to live and furnish life for us, the creeping blight must be amputated. It must be amputated before it is too late. Here at the Land Clearance Authority, the men who are making the St. Louis of tomorrow plot out our futures. Here, in collaboration with the City Planning Commission, city departments, and the Board of Education, skilled planners, engineers, and other technicians lay out the step-by-step elimination or rehabilitation of a city unit. Here, coldly charted on graphs and maps, is the timetable of destruction.
So that's kind of why our neighborhood looks the way it does. The other thing is, St. Louis during the 60s was also really into things being modern and classifying anything that was older than, like, let's say 1930 as being a slum. They tore down huge swaths of our city. Mill Creek Valley, well, actually even our entire riverfront for the Arch. That used to be a thriving community, and now it's an arch. Don't hate the arch, I just hate that they tore everything down for an arch.
Mill Creek was an open wound. Mill Creek had to be razed to the ground in an operation of radical surgery. Long march for urban renewal, in 1958, Mill Creek kept its date with the wrecking crane and the bulldozer. The old began to make way for the new. It was another step toward the future as the city fights back. And crowning the rebirth of the city will be the Jefferson National Expansion Memorial, the Saarinen Arch.
Back in the 30s, the Smithsonian Institute, perhaps the nation's largest single collector of valuable objects, carted away several boxcar loads of remains from St. Louis's old riverfront district. You're welcome to go to Washington and see them.
But everything kind of followed after that. They wanted everything to be new and modern, and for instance, Mill Creek Valley, they tore the entire place down and didn't have a plan to develop it with anything. And so it sat empty for years and years and years, and just now, finally, parts of it are starting to be developed, and it was torn down in the 60s. So, and of course, that was where a lot of the poor people lived.
When the Mill Creek project is completed, 7,300 people will live where 18,000 tried to live before, and there will be an adjacent industrial park. The 7,300 residents of tomorrow and the new industries will bring the city tax money in excess of $2.5 million annually, a seven-fold increase in income from that area.
But today in my neighborhood, there's a bit of a ray of hope. People are starting to think about and turn to the north side as a possibility again. And people have tried for years, since at least the 70s, 80s, to put these places back in order. But, you know, of course, with a lot of things, it's easier said than done. But I do think currently, right now, with a really large development that's going in very, very close to my house, the development being the NGA, which is the National Geospatial Agency. It's a $1.65 billion development, and it is seeming to spur on more development around the area. Certainly a lot of speculation. Now, Lafayette Square. Lafayette Square is interesting. It's been through its ups and downs, just like my neighborhood.
The Marquis de Lafayette had honored St. Louis with a visit. The city returned the favor by giving his name to its first park in 1836. Formed from land Laclede had set aside 50 years before to be common pasture for the village livestock. Now the center for Lafayette Square, it was considered well worth framing with ornamental stone, with gates and landscaping to match. Cannons from the British Revolutionary War sloop Acton, raised from Charleston Harbor, were placed in its center. These were the work of the city's foremost architects of the 1870s. Mansard roofs, rounded windows, elaborate cornices. These were how elegance was defined in the post-Civil War years, when the neighborhood was one of the handsomest in St. Louis.
But of course, you know, Lafayette Square, just like my neighborhood, fell on some extremely hard times. In 1896, there was a tornado that destroyed a lot of Lafayette Square. A lot of the Italianate houses you see in Lafayette Square are Italianate because the mansards were blown off during the tornado, and they just decided it was easier to brick them up and put a cornice on top than it was to rebuild the Second Empire mansard. And it was developed for the same sort of people, you know, people who were steamboat captains and, you know, ran respectable businesses and did things like that. Like, I'm sure there's a comparable person to Mr. Brown that started a house in Lafayette Square. And of course, there are a lot of infill structures in Lafayette Square as well. As you'll see, there are a lot of buildings that look really old, and you know, I've even seen them mentioned on like old house sites or whatever for this historic structure, and it's like, that was built in 2015. Not quite historic, but it definitely keeps the character of a historic neighborhood together by building structures like that. I do hope that at some point they do that in my neighborhood when they infill these lots, that it's something that keeps the flavor of the neighborhood. But the reason I really wanted to go in today and compare these two neighborhoods is not to give you guys a huge history lesson on our tour, or to even talk about what's going on with any of the neighborhoods, even what happened in the neighborhoods. I simply wanted to put one thing to the forefront, which is preservation and why it's important. You look at a neighborhood like Lafayette Square and you think, wow, it's wonderful and it's beautiful, and who wouldn't want to live there? It's a gem, right? And it is. It's a gem for our city. But it wasn't always like that. In the 70s, many people were talking about tearing it down, and there were even plans to put it and make it into a truck stop. So you can imagine those beautiful houses now and think about what it would be if it were a truck stop, and what that would mean also for the surrounding areas. It's not like truck stops bring in the most, you know, the best environmental factors. You know, you're breathing in fumes and grossness, and it would have been good for anybody. Any of the surrounding areas, downtown, nothing. It would have been a wasteland. Now it's a beautiful, thriving community. And I bring that up because it was important that got saved, and it did get saved. And it got saved by individuals taking on one house at a time and putting it back together and moving their families in and starting a life there. And that's what it's going to take to bring back my neighborhood. So I see these people in my comments, and of course, they're probably not even the ones watching my video now. You know, I've had a lot of really negative comments. Mostly, of course, you guys are almost always 110% positive, but there's a sneaking few percentage marks there of people who are really rude for no reason And I see them much like I see the people in the 70s telling people how Lafayette Square was ugly, it will never be anything, it's a blight, it's urban blight, it's urban decay, and it needs to be dealt with a wrecking ball. People tell me the same things here. I've gotten, your house should just be better off it's being a gravel pit, your house would be better off as a parking lot, they should just tear the whole thing down and make it into farmland, this, that, the other. And I'm here to tell you guys, simply put, it's really worthwhile to preserve these neighborhoods. It's worthwhile for our history, so we know our past, to preserve these things. If you read it in a book, that's just it. It's words on a page. If you can come into a space like mine or the Campbell House and experience what it was like for that time period, it gives you a whole new concept of what it must have been like to be in the past. It creates a bridge that you can walk across, which you can talk and feel and touch and be part of it. If only for a glimmering moment, be part of it.
In many of the once fashionable areas of old St. Louis, the creeping blight is making itself felt. These neighborhoods are teetering on the brink. Signs for sleeping rooms and furnished rooms advertise the fact. A nudge of neglect in houses like these will be a part of the Mill Creek of tomorrow.
The reason it was brought back from the brink, because it was almost demolished, the reason it was brought back from the brink was a dedicated community of people who loved the neighborhood, who believed in it, who just saw the potential. You know, it wasn't a terribly safe neighborhood at the time. It wasn't, it was considered slums. It was urban blight decay. But there was a dedicated team of people, a community of people, who decided, we're going to make our stand here. We're going to build our lives here. We're going to keep our families here. And we're going to save this neighborhood one house at a time with one family at a time. And we're going to work together. We're going to put the park back together. We're going to donate so we can get things put back in our park that used to be there. And we're going to preserve this for future generations. Essentially, those are people who I feel have the same mindset I do. They wanted to make something of their neighborhood. They wanted to take something that was so neglected and turn it back into something that was so wonderful that so many people saw as an eyesore. They saw as just rusty gold, or just, it was decayed, but it was so beautiful. And it could be again, and they could see it. They could see past the dust, just like I see past the dust in this neighborhood. I see what it can be. And I think there's something brilliant to take from that they were able to take that neighborhood and make it into what it is today, which is an absolute jewel. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned there, and I think that's why it's so comparable to my neighborhood. That's what it can be. That's what it can be if enough people are dedicated to it.
George Brooks is director of the Missouri Historical Society.
Really start with the people in the neighborhood. If they aren't interested in preserving it, I think you've lost 90% of the battle. You can't preserve a neighborhood just for the sake of preserving a neighborhood, though. It has to come from the people within the neighborhood to really want to do something about it.
And I'm hoping in some small way that I can be part of that spark, part of that push, part of that, momentum to get this project going, to get more people interested in here. And I'm not the only spark happening around here. There have been people who have been preserving these homes for decades. Some of them own multiple homes, and they preserve all of them. And they've been taking very good care of them. But of course, there are going to always be more. And even though we've lost so much in this neighborhood, we've lost so many buildings, more can be built. It's a blank canvas, sure, right? But with a blank canvas comes the possibility of anything and everything. And I just want to make sure that I'm here to help steer this neighborhood to make it the best possibility possible, not only for myself, but for the future generations and for the people who are here in this neighborhood now. I just want to make this the best I can, and now that I have this audience, it really is remarkable, because now I am able, I think, in some way to make a bit of a difference. Before, it was just one guy working on a house. Now it's a community coming together and seeing this neighborhood and seeing it through my eyes and the way I see it, which is the way I see it is it's a neighborhood with so much potential that's just been forgotten about for so long. And if people would just wake up and think about what it could be, the families and the memories that they could have here, the lives that can be lived here, the lives that have been lived here that have been going great for a long time. People have just discounted this area for so long and just not given it its proper due. And I just want to blast that. Like, it's important and it's necessary and it's so very needed in this area. So guys, I know that was a little different than our typical videos for the week, but I feel it was something that was necessary and important to share with you guys. To get kind of deep into my psyche of what I feel about these neighborhoods and what I see being possible. So I do hope you guys enjoyed. We'll be back next week with, I promise, another restoration video. I was gonna do one this week, and I do have some footage, but I ended up getting sick and going on another road trip for some really awesome items, which I'm sure you guys are gonna really be excited to see, because I keep finding really amazing things. As always, guys, thank you all so much. I owe you guys my continued debt of gratitude to you all. Like, it's an amazing community, and I'm so glad that I'm able to share these amazing videos with you guys and to talk about things that I think are near and dear to me that my family are probably sick and tired of hearing from me, because I talk about them a lot to everybody else. So thanks for lending me your ear, for allowing me to share these incredible places and incredible things. And yeah, we'll be back with you guys next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
This old water tower has been a shrine in my heart ever since I came to St. Louis. I came here in 1903, as a boy. I used to climb the old tower. It permitted us to go up in it, and I remember counting the number of steps that it took to get to the top. 361 steps, as I recall.
You've written a poem about it, haven't you?
Yes, I wrote a little poem one time, put it in the community news.
Would you read it?
Yes. I recall when a boy what a treat it would be to climb up the stairs till at last one could see for hundreds of miles over buildings and trees from the top of its crown as it swayed in the breeze. One time our great city thought they'd tear it all down, but the neighbors rose up with a cry and a frown and went to their rescue and valiantly fought and quick put to rout this horrible thought. Now dressed up again in its pretty new gown, it stands as a monument in its home-loving town. With its beauty the same, though in years it is old, but still to admirers 'tis as precious as gold. That is my sentiments of the water tower, and I sure stay in my heart as long as it stays on earth.